not to be super self-aware. That means that I was gone, like in a meditation. You know, I was just in it. And who knows, maybe it was a really shitty performance. But to me, that is what gets my juices flowing and makes me feel like, oh, okay, there was no, Nell was, the filter of Nell was gone, you know? Nell is still there, of course, because that's who I am, but like I wasn't thinking about, you know, my laundry or my dog or like, God, I really messed that line up, you know, that kind of thing. So it's play, it's therapy, it's collaboration is really exciting to me when somebody surprises me on stage in a moment with something, and if you're open enough in the moment and not just going through the motions, even subtle things, you know, pop up, and if you come off stage and you've had a discovery about the play, that always feels really exciting. Like even in Seagull, up in the last like 2 weeks, I had like some major discoveries about the play where I was like, geez, why didn't I know this in the first week? But I was like, thank goodness I was open enough in the moment on stage that I had the discovery at all. So, yeah.
Well, it leads to, I mean, it leads to something I thought about in listening to other actors in interviews. Timothy Oliphant and Meryl Streep talking to Terry Gross. She would ask them, well, how did this happen, or how did that? And they both said it happened because I'm listening to the other actors on stage. How much does listening play into what you were just talking about?
Oh, it's huge. In fact, I mean, it's huge for every play you do, but just as an example of how important it is, very first day of rehearsal of Seagull, Libby Apple said, you guys are going to be okay if you just listen to each other. And I don't mean pretend like you're listening. I mean like really listen. Listen every single night. Don't anticipate a single thing. Because when you're anticipating something, you're also anticipating your response, the quality of your response. And then you're not in the moment. And you could have a great plan about what your response is going to be, and as soon as he says that line, I'm going to slap him, or whatever it is. But it doesn't, to somebody sitting on the outside who's really keyed in, it doesn't feel genuine because they can tell you weren't listening. They can, you know, cause and effect. And it's really hard, and it takes a lot of focus and attention to be that intent in every moment. So.
What was the most difficult aspect of playing Nina this year?
The listening was difficult. Particularly because the thing that's great about the new theater is also the thing that's hard about the new theater. The audience is so close, and you can see the slightest thing, but we are also so aware of you. And it's just the way it is, you know. If somebody's sleeping or coughing or moves their head funny in the front row, if you're listening, that becomes part of what you hear. You know, and it's not just the big things. It's that thing of like somebody goes up and wipes their nose, and you catch the movement, and it takes it out of you for a little tiny second. And it's fine. It's part of what being on stage is. But so that was difficult. Also, going to the place that play required on a regular basis was emotionally draining, and I don't regret a single second of it. I'm glad I went through it. There were some days where I was more successful in getting there than other days, but that was, I went through phases in that run where I would get trepidatious about just the thought of coming into work, and can I pull myself up by my bootstraps and do it today, you know? But like I said, I wouldn't have traded it for the world.
What did you, in those circumstances, what or who did you rely on the most, do you think, in that production?
Definitely Tasso. He was my scene partner in a lot of the scenes where that was happening for me. And I also, my friend Susanna Flood, who I mentioned earlier, who's an amazing young actress, she just played Phoebe in Shakespeare in the Park, and now she's going into Tribes off Broadway. She has a love affair with Nina and has wanted to play the part, and you know, is so enamored of Seagull. And she was, before we opened, she was talking to me, and I was sharing all of my anxiety about it, and she said, you know, Nell, the problem with Chekhov and this role in particular, and Arkadina and these iconic roles, is that people look at them and think, oh God, how could I ever do that? And that's your first response to it. It's not, I can do that. I can rise to the challenge. Like, your first response as an actor is, oh my God, I can't possibly. And Susanna then said to me, wherever you are on the day, whatever it is you're feeling, that's enough. You don't have to force yourself into some kind of emotional reality that you're not in. You can only start where you are when you walk into work. And ultimately, you have to try and get somewhere, but where you are is enough. And that gave me confidence in a funny way. It made me feel like I was up to the challenge, and I had previously been really not sure if I was. So.
I asked Tasso at one of the park talks he was at, because I was very aware, being from the Bay Area, that the world premiere of it had been with John and Chris at Marin Theater Company. I think Jason directed that.
Yes, he did.
But it was still Libby's translation.
Yes.
I asked Tasso if he talked to John about that, and he said never. And which surprised me as a theater goer. And he said, it's not that I avoided it, it's that John and I are good friends, but it just never came up. So did you talk to Chris?
Never. And it's not that Chris and I are not good friends. We are. It's just that a couple of things. You know, that performance was very close to their hearts, and it wasn't like it was 5 years ago. It was the year before, and I wanted to be focused on what I was going to do, and I think that she wanted to keep what she had done, rightly so, you know. And it wasn't that we never talked about it. It just never came up, you know. And if it had, I probably would have been open to talking a little bit about it. But it was just, a whole new play. So.
Well, talk about the play. I mean, one of the things I think a lot of people, certainly I was so impressed with, was Libby's translation and the method of translation, which I'd never heard of anyone doing. Gave the audience, I thought, more access to the play and to Chekhov than I'd ever been in a Chekhov play. What was your response as an actor to the script when you read it?
It feels incredibly contemporary to me. I mean, it sits well in my mouth. And other translations or adaptations, adaptation, that's dicey when it comes to this, of Chekhov, they feel a little stilted sometimes. And Libby, part of what she was trying to do was really make it flow off the tongues of the actors easily. And she was constantly checking in rehearsal. And we changed things in the script, even in our production, between Marin and here. And up until, you know, the last couple weeks before opening, because she was like, rhythmically, that's not feeling right to you. I can tell you have trouble saying that line. What would be better? Here are some options. And Alison Horsley, who's the literal translator, was in the room in the beginning and at the end. Does anybody here not know how Libby works on these plays? So Libby has a literal translator, Alison Horsley, who translates from the Russian, and then she gives that to Libby with options for, like, some of the more specific important words. And then Libby looks things over and rearranges things and picks, and then she'll call Alison and be like, you know that word when he says, you know, like the crow in that one play, is there another word for crow in Russian that would be fine? And Alison comes back and says, how about raven? Raven works too. And Libby's like, oh, that sounds much better, you know? So they collaborate in that way. It's a translation and in some ways an adaptation too, because Libby's reordering. So.
Well, I think it's interesting, and again, I'm interested in your comment about it being contemporary, because I've never heard of a translator that just virtually ignores, in the first stage, as Alison does, idiom. And just says, this word for word, this is what it says. And then Libby, as you say, goes in and starts to rework it. With her directing, did you feel you had greater access to that process, to the script itself, or was there something different for you about it?
Absolutely, because as I said, she was willing to be collaborative with us. She wanted to know when something didn't feel right. And we made suggestions, and sometimes she took them, and sometimes she said no. and as a director, that's your prerogative, and as a translator, that's your prerogative. But she was in the room with a lot of us that she's worked with before, and she trusts us, and she asked for those things. So we were willing to give them those answers or suggestions. And it does. I don't know why. It feels, there were very few things about that play that felt like, if you wanted to do it set in 2012, you know, the language itself, not necessarily the situations, but the language was easy to understand for me. And the school groups that came to see it and people who had never liked Chekhov, never seen Chekhov, came and they said, wow, I could understand it. And that was a real testament to that work that she had done, I think.
Well, I think I'll give you a testament for your performance. I have never cared about Nina the way you made me care about her and what happened to her.
Oh, thank you.
It was really quite wonderful.
Thanks.
I want to talk, too, a little bit about Medea, Macbeth, Cinderella.
Oh, sighs and murmurs, sighs and murmurs.
Well, I actually have a very serious intellectual question about it.
Sure.
What the hell's going on there?
You know, that's my question too. No. Well, you know, it's a really interesting it's a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to admit that it's an interesting idea. And I think that, no, that's okay, that's okay.
No, it's okay, because he just took different pieces and made it sound like this was terrific. I thought it was stupid.
Sure. And
He